my name is Julia Limmer. I am a political science and sociology student at UMass Amherst, and today I would like to present my project, When Autocracies Last, the effect of the performance legitimation strategy on the election and tenure of autocratic leaders. My research considers these following concepts, but they are words with differing definitions depending on who you ask, so readers need a baseline of what these mean before we can continue. So, competitive in this regard means an election where other candidates and other parties are legally allowed, and voters have the ability to pick from multiple candidates on the ballot. This is a very basic definition of competitive, so any election that ticks these three boxes is considered competitive, even if there are other factors such as voter fraud or any other means of cheating during an election. The second definition is legitimation strategies, which is how a regime justifies why it should be in charge. And specifically, performance legitimation is the idea that if a regime is providing what the citizenry expects it to, the citizenry will continue to support the regime, thereby increasing leader tenure. So here is my first main scholarly article called Von Soest and Grevogel. You can see that it details 6 legitimation strategies, including the performance one. And the main finding here that informs my research is that the performance strategy has a hand in legitimizing all authoritarian regimes, which means that it is one that is very important to multiple different leaders, but something that is missing from von Soest and Grevogel's work is that any relation to tenure length doesn't exist. So we know that the performance strategy is used by authoritarian regimes, by all authoritarian regimes, but we don't have any measure for how that affects the length of a leader, the tenure length of a leader. Second, we have Tannenberg et al., which is a continuation of von Soest and Grevogel's work. This here has condensed legitimation strategies into 4 of them, but still has a performance-based one. And the main points here is that Tannenberg et al. Takes the viewpoint that leaders, or how leaders seeking legitimacy, is more important than how the citizenry expects it. So that's what it's based on. It also has a century's worth of data with a far greater number of countries and observations than von Soest and Grevogel, and has the point the performance legitimation claims are most likely found in electoral autocracies because of their efforts to imitate democratic regimes without any actual reform. So this combined with competition is a experiment waiting to happen. It's a great way to try and figure out if there is any relation to regime length in competitive elections, especially competitive electoral autocracies. Again, the main attribute here is legitimation strategies, and again, there is relation to tenure length that is missing from this research. Here we have Hyde 2011, which is a very good example of the performance tactic in action. Hyde found that a norm was created to invite international election observers over time, because if a country didn't invite international election observers, they were labeled as a pseudo-democracy, or quote-unquote bad in the eyes of the international system. So by inviting an observer, there was a chance they could be labeled as good and also being labeled as bad, which gives them a higher chance to get certain types of international aid that are only given out to countries that are deemed to be good, i.e. deemed as a democracy. So Hyde found that countries would risk the bad label if there was also a potential to get the good label without relinquishing any of their power, because by going home to their countries and providing international aid, these regimes are showing that they have a right to be in power because they are doing what is needed for the citizenry. So main attribute, clear example of the performance tactic, and once again, it is missing a tenure length component. We have Tannenberg et al. Again. So one of the main points of Tannenberg et al. That I didn't discuss before was a reason why legitimacy strategies are studied is because how a regime tries to justify its rule affects how stable the country is and affects how the regime rules. So one of these points or one of these reasons is that it concerns tracking changes in legitimacy justifications, especially during crises. So this means that not only looking into the timing component of the Cold War because of a vast amount of regime and ideology change, it's important, but also provides a clear answer to why answering my research questions are important. It's because figuring out how a country seeks legitimacy and how it's looked for legitimacy for X amount of time can give insight to how and why it's as stable or not stable as it is, or how and why they have specific methods of ruling. So now this main attribute is the time and crisis component, but once again, it is missing tenure length. So here are the remaining questions that I had after reading through many scholarly articles, which is, as the competition of an autocratic election increases, the likelihood of an autocratic leader to employ the performance legitimation tactic increases. So this is the hypothesis concerning tenure length. And then the second one, as the likelihood of a shift in regime ideology increases, the likelihood of using the performance legitimation tactic will also increase. So this is the hypotheses concerning the timing component, as in which year a regime starts or which year a regime increases its use in the legitimation tactic. So this isn't tenure length, it's time started. I needed 3 data sets in order to test my hypotheses because I found different components, but I needed to find data sets with said components that could be condensed. So we have the NELDA, National Elections Across Democracy and Autocracy with Competition, VDEM, Varieties of Democracy with Legitimation Strategies and Regime Types, and REIGN, Rulers, Elections, and Irregular Governance, which is leader name and tenure length by both amount of months and years. So the common variables across these 3 datasets are country, the country name, year of the election, and election type. Executive, legislative, etc. I am only looking at executive. So here we have a slide about merging because 3 datasets is a lot to merge. It is possible, but it is very time consuming. Each dataset has to be cleaned and pruned of observations that are not relevant. And most importantly, the country names, years, and types of elections need to be 100% identical in all 3 datasets for the merge to work. I have been using Stata, but the issue with this merge and the issue with Stata is that some elections appear to be copies of others because based on country name and year alone, it appeared to be duplicates. However, a lot of countries have a runoff system, meaning 2 rounds of an executive elections is common, but Stata didn't recognize that. So to fix this issue, I've had to manually go through the datasets and assign each individual election an ID number so the information in VDEM and NELDA would match and then be used to merge with REIGN. So as of right now, I don't have any results yet because I am still manually coding ID numbers for the REIGN dataset as conference day gets closer. The unfortunate delay is caused by issues with Stata and the struggles of teaching it to myself. I have learned how to use Stata by watching videos, teaching myself. It's been several weeks of work, and the learning curve means that my results are a bit delayed. But some, if not all, of my results from my analysis will be ready or should be ready by conference day. So thank you for your patience, and I hope the presentation I gave you today will provide a great basis for understanding the results that I will share on conference day. Finally, here are the main references that I used, and I thank you for listening.